Well, time now for a quick look at today's papers with Gillian Joseph.
You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Barrister and Futurist Andrew Eborn and the Sunday Mirror's assistant editor, Laura Armstrong. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Where is my son's body, Putin? That's the question in the Sunday People from the mother of arch-Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, who's died in prison. She believes the Russians are hiding his body to prevent the truth coming out about how he died. The Sunday Times, meanwhile, claims that officers from the Russian security services visited Mr. Navalny in prison just 2 days before his death. After Ukraine pulled its troops out of the city of Avdiivka in the face of advancing Russian forces, the Observer says President Zelensky is now pleading for more arms to repel Putin's invasion. The Sunday Telegraph has an attack by Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer on former US President Donald Trump for what he calls his recent bad faith criticism of NATO countries. The Mail leads with an investigation which it says reveals that eco-activists have been plotting to occupy the homes of MPs in the run-up to the next general election. Laura's paper, this Sunday Mirror, has been speaking to royal insiders who say despite hopes of a reconciliation after the King's cancer diagnosis, Prince William has decided that there's no way back for his estranged brother Harry. Same lead story for the Sunday Express. Likewise, The Sun on Sunday, which also says that Harry was stopped from going to Sandringham with the King when he came to the UK to visit him. And the Daily Star Sunday claims victory in its campaign to free Baloo the bear from a Romanian zoo, where he's reportedly been forced to drink alcohol and poked with sticks to amuse visitors. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by the Barrister and Futurist Andrew Eborn and the Sunday Mirror's assistant editor Laura Armstrong. Welcome back to both of you. Let's start with the front page of the Sunday Times and this claim that the FSB's visit to Alexei Navalny took place 2 days before his death, and there's some suspicious ongoings that they're claiming in the article.
Yes, absolutely. They're saying that they disconnected the CCTV and so on and so forth. The mother, the 69-year-old Lyudmila, turned up and the body was not there. She'd flown the 1,200 miles with a lawyer to basically see her son, and she was told that he's disappeared. And the narrative's been changing as to the cause of death, whether it's a heart attack or all these other bits and pieces. And everybody's sort of turning around and saying, well, the finger's pointing at Putin. Joe Biden came out very quickly to say that it's pointing at his door. Putin's people have been across the media to deny the accusations. But the reality is the truth has got to come out. And the sooner that this can come out, the better.
Laura, Alexei's mother and the lawyer, they were handed a death notice saying that he'd succumbed to sudden death syndrome.
Yeah, sudden death syndrome being, of course, cardiac arrest where you can't see the cause of the cardiac arrest, which, again, yet more suspicious circumstances for them. I mean, his family also came out very quickly and said, you know, within hours of him dying, Putin must pay for this. This is murder. There's no doubt whatsoever what's going on here. And now they've had the additional trauma and heartache of not knowing where his body is and not really knowing what happened to him. And unfortunately, I think that will go on for some time.
And Andrew, we've seen shots of those who've been wanting to pay their respects to Navalny in Russia. Over 300 people arrested for doing so. Yeah,
and they're being carted off, and the horrendous pictures, again, across the media of people being taken away. The Sunday Times has one on its front cover about the fight goes on. And he was obviously Putin's biggest opponent, and now that opposition has disappeared.
But doesn't that show the strength of feeling for him as well, that people knew that that would be what they would get? There were anecdotal stories of people saying that they'd gone to lay their flowers and left immediately so that they didn't have repercussions. So obviously they knew that this was the risk, but still felt that it was important that they did that for him.
It's an interesting point about, as you say, it will galvanise the opposition to Putin. In a lot, certainly we've seen that in America, where people are sort of turning around and saying, look, as a result of this, we need to ramp up our efforts to support those against Putin.
And we've seen that the authorities have tried to clear the flowers, only for them to be, you know, replaced by people. So they are certainly determined to make their views known. Let's have a look at the Sunday Express and this story about a man charged after 6 found in a lorry. Yeah. Laura, take us into this.
Yeah, I mean, it's dreadful, isn't it? This is the human cost of the crisis that we've been seeing with people desperate to get to the UK. This was a major incident in East Sussex. Several people were discovered. They tried to get into a refrigerated lorry and someone had to hack them out with an axe after hearing banging. And 6 people were wrapped in blankets and had to be taken away on stretchers. Thankfully, no one has died, but it brings home really how bad this situation has become.
And the investigation ongoing, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's important, the emphasis on this story is on the abhorrent people traffickers, which makes the difference, because normally the headlines are about the number of people coming over on boats and so on and so forth. It's now the real evil that's happening are the people who are trafficking these people. So it's good that he's been charged, and we need to make sure that that's the emphasis. They're the people who are the real targets of this particular side.
And the Express inside, they've got a double-page spread on, well, defeating the small boat gangs. Similar story.
Yeah.
Well, Rishi's obviously very keen to hammer home the fact that this is happening and they're really tackling this. It says in this that the government expects us to suffer defeat in the House of Lords this week. So obviously it's part of a double-pronged attack to show that not only are we trying to send people to Rwanda, we're also tackling things on the French side. But, I mean, I read this and I questioned why some of these things weren't in action already. One of the steps mentioned is the UK border forces to step up joint patrols with the French authorities. We're nearly a year now since Rishi agreed that £480 million deal with France. Why is that not already here?
And you're absolutely right. They need to show progress. It's one of the key 5 pledges that Rishi made about stop the boats. And if people don't see it and see sort of progress in this election year, it will come back to bite him. And Rwanda's just become a bad word, hasn't it? And the bet that he had with Piers Morgan that there wouldn't be a single person going to Rwanda. Well, let's see what happens over the next few weeks.
Yeah. I think they stress, Mr Tomlinson in this interview stresses that this is compassion, that they're being compassionate. It's repeated over and over again. Clearly they're very aware of the attitude to the Rwanda scheme.
Yeah, and you do have to remember that these are people at the end of the day, and I think the real evil, going back to how we started with this, are the people traffickers, and we need to stamp them out.
But what do you think the public perception is, Laura? Is there any sense that any progress has been made? As we say, one of Rishi Sunak's pledges was to stop the boats.
I think that it's become, at points in the sort of march towards this election, it has seemed at points like the only issue. And I'm not sure, I think people's engagement with it is very much down to the numbers, and the numbers that tell the same story over and again, they're still massive. 52 people made that crossing just on Friday. You know, since Sunak's appointment, 38,668 people have come over. You can't really argue with those kind of statistics. It demonstrates it's not working. And so I think, you know, obviously they are trying to tackle it head on, but we're just not seeing the kind of progress that they want to see.
They need to show some progress if they've got any chance in the election.
But how do they do that?
Well, it's difficult. There is no progress at all. I think you either turn around and it was Abraham Lincoln who said, if you count the tail of a dog as a leg, how many legs does a dog have? The answer is it still has 4. Just because you call a tail a leg doesn't make it so. So calling Rwanda a safe country doesn't necessarily make it so. You need to look at the whole thing. But I think the real evil, and people forget about the humanity at the end of this, the people who are suffering are dying, and the moral thing to do is to stop it. But we need to make sure that we focus on that sort of stuff. So the narrative needs to look at what steps are being taken. So rather than stopping the boats, what steps are being taken to ensure that the people traffickers are the ones who are being targeted.
I do think this is progress, though. When initially the deal was made, the French authorities were quite resistant to sort of team up, and they were just saying, well, no, it's going to be search and rescue, we'll just escort them into British waters. They were saying there were legal issues with using drones. These are all measures that have been used to used really well in Belgium, for example, where they've really cut down. So the fact that they have actually managed to make these steps is progress.
Yeah. And the fact that a man's been charged is progress. You know, that's one less person doing this abhorrent trade.
Yeah, but just to clarify that he has been charged and hasn't been...
Yes, it is important to make these points, as we said beforehand. Yes. But he's been charged, and it's a stage. Let's see where it goes to.
Yes, we shall do. Let's have a look at the Sunday Telegraph. And this is a story regarding Keir Starmer's thinly veiled attack on Donald Trump's... well, his line that there were NATO delinquents, I think was the word that he used, and they weren't paying their bills and he wouldn't protect them. In fact, he'd encourage the likes of Putin to attack them.
It is extraordinary. The language of Donald Trump always hits the headlines, and if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight, and nobody's better at demanding coddle and inches than Donald Trump. So this is basically he's attacking Trump's mentions about NATO, calling it a sort of bad faith, and said, look, we've all got to rally together to support this sort of side. It is interesting. I mean, Trump is still ahead of Biden in the polls on that sort of thing, and the more that's thrown at Trump, the more popular he becomes. So he's a master at manipulating the media and getting that sort of stuff. And it's interesting to have the two side by side. The juxtaposition in Starmer and Trump is delicious.
Laura, Starmer saying that obviously he's going to stand up for the allies. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting that he's chosen to go as far as he has in this. I mean, obviously it is a veiled remark, but it's very, very thin, isn't it? And I mean, sort of traditionally, some of his front benchers have been very sort of vociferous in their criticism of Mr. Trump, but recently it's all been a lot more cautious. Even sort of David Lammy, who in the past has referred to him as a woman-hating neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, has more recently said, you know, if I was to get the job, I'd do my duty and work with, you know, so it's interesting that he's gone as far as he has.
OK. Laura and Andrew, for the moment, thank you very much. Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview, where I'm joined by the Sunday Mirror's assistant editor, Laura Armstrong, and Barrister and Futurist Andrew Eborn. So let's take you through the papers now. We're going to start with the Times. We'll have a look at the Post Office story. This is, well, if it's true, is quite remarkable. The former Post Office chairman says he was told by a senior civil servant to slow down sub-postmasters' compensation payments to allow the government to limp into the next general election. What do we make of that, Andrew?
Well, it's extraordinary if it's true, and I think you make that point. To say, I mean, those are the words they emphasise. He even said he went limp into the next election. He was told by a senior civil servant, not named, to slow down the sub-postmasters' compensation payment to allow the government, as they say, limp into the next election. If it is true, I mean, it's horrendous. Obviously, these sort of things need to be looked at. We've covered this beforehand, where a story will hit the headlines, but it's not yet fully played out. And I think we need to hear all sides of this. He's now highlighted this point. We're going to hear the responses, and people can decide for themselves. But it is an appalling headline, an appalling story if it's true.
Laura?
I actually think one of the saddest things about this is the response to it. They have a quote in there from Alan Bates, who's obviously been the champion who's led this, described as one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in British history. He says that it's long been evident that the government, despite all its fine words, is doing everything to slow or stall payments. And it's basically, he's not even surprised. It's sort of one of those things that, as we say, this isn't verified, and it has been denied in response by the government. But, you know, it's the fact that people like him have been through so much, to the extent that some horrendous claim like this is just more of the same for them.
Yeah. He's suggesting they take it out of government hands and put it into private ones to make sure that it happens with efficiencies. But it was the pressure, you may all recall, about ITV's brilliant series that actually brought it to front and centre. And I've interviewed a number of the people concerned, and you talk about this horrendous thing which has gone on for years, and people have lost their lives as a result, not just their livelihoods, and absolutely destroyed. It must never happen again. And stories like this are horrendous if true.
Yes, shouldn't have taken an ITV documentary for, an ITV drama for this to be taken seriously.
Yes, indeed. The Times also, this story about William. He is going to build and fund £3 million social housing development on his land to tackle homelessness.
Isn't that great? 24 homes.
Money where your mouth is.
24 homes in Cornwall. He did say he was going to do this, and good for him on that sort of basis. It sounds a lot. Well, 24 homes, £3 million. It's a start, and I think the whole idea about social housing is important. He's putting his money where his mouth is. There are lots of good stories coming out about William, and I think it's good that we have a positive story about the Royals on that sort of basis. So it's interesting, the juxtaposition of the briefing on both sides, what's happening at the moment with the brother on one side and that whatever's going on there, but also coming out with a really positive thing where, and hopefully he can lead the way and inspire others to do the same thing.
Laura, do you think we're going to see more initiatives like this? And is it substantial, 24 homes?
I think it's sort of it's substantial in principle, isn't it? It's, as we've said a couple of times, putting his money where his mouth is. And obviously this is a real passion project for him. He's been a patron of Centrepoint for many years now. I think he's even slept rough on one occasion to sort of highlight the issues there. And we are in the middle of a housing crisis. So I think that, you know, this is certainly going to be very popular. I'm sure that, you know, it would have been appreciated if he could have pushed to a bit more than 24, but the point is there.
Interesting. It says they'll also provide residents with a range of wraparound services, including mental health support, counselling, training and employment opportunities in what Kensington Palace described as the Duchy's first innovative housing project to help address homelessness. So it's not just the homes.
No, it's the whole thing, and I think that's very good. I quite like the Newman cartoon in the corner, which has got the three little piggies saying we can get Duchy social housing so long as we're organic, is what it says on that sort of basis. So.
It will be interesting to see how they appoint those homes.
Yes.
24 of the most popular social houses in the country.
I can imagine.
Absolutely.
Yes, you probably need to enter a lottery to win one of them. Let's finish off with the Express. More rail woes as works are announced. Rail passengers set for Easter travel chaos.
Well, it's more rail woes, but did they ever really stop? I mean, it sort of feels very constant at the moment. I can't remember the last time I used a train because they don't run. Obviously, I understand that there are people are striking for a reason and they need to push their case, but it is, you know, nobody's going to be surprised by this because it is more of the same. And it's a shame.
You're right. We've never had a good story about railways, have we? And all that sort of thing about transport, they're renaming lines and things like that for all that sort of stuff. You know, it's absolute nonsense.
It's such a shame as well when people are being encouraged to move away from cars. You can't. There isn't a train to take you instead. No,
dozens of network rail projects between Good Friday and Easter Monday, and that comes after a fresh wave of strikes announced by ASLEF from March the 1st.
Yes.
So not a good time to be taking the train.
No,
it seems.
Not. The train doesn't take the strain anymore, does it?
No, certainly not at Easter. Thank you both for taking us through the papers. Andrew and Laura, good to see you, as always. Thank you.